2/3 of the world is active on social media. 2/3 of the world. That's a 2024 statistic from Statista. You can track down if you care to. It's really hard to fathom how much attention is given to the internet and how connected it makes all of us. But anytime a church comes to us and they say like, hey, and this happens so much less than it used to. But in 2010, 2014, like this was like every other question was this, like, why should my church invest in this and care about this? And I simply say, hey, look, it's just the Great Commission, right? Go out into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples. The internet gives you that avenue for free and is you're one of the only people in the history of humankind that has this ability.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sowers Podcast. My name is Matt Naismith, and I am your host. This podcast features stories of Canadian church planters and leaders who are influencing kingdom movement and impacting their communities. Whether you're a church planter, pastor in a church, part of a church planting team, or someone just wanting to learn more, we pray you get inspired to become a sower in the places where you live, work, learn, and play. We pray this is a blessing to you, and if it is, we would ask you to share links to episodes, subscribe on whatever platform you are using. With that, let's get to our next conversation. Welcome back, friends, to the Sowers Podcast. Really grateful that you are with us here now for season 2. I trust you had an incredible summer and are ready for the fall season and all that the fall typically brings. Wanted to let you know about a few things. We have officially added YouTube to our Rolodex of ways in which you can engage with this podcast. On YouTube, you will be able to see these interviews through video format. And so if that is more of interest to you, you can go to YouTube and search the Sowers Podcast. And the interview that you're about to listen to will also be there on YouTube. And so another way that you can engage with the podcast. As always, please go ahead and share to hopefully inspire more and more people to become sowers of the gospel in the places where they live, work, learn, and play. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's a real treat for me to introduce you to Brady Shearer. If you've not heard of him before, Brady is the creative and director of Pro Church Tools. You can find Brady on Instagram. And Pro Church Tools is helping churches and leaders navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. And they have developed a number of different resources. He has a very popular blog that provides lots of information for helping churches get the word out about the gospel and their church on social media. And so I'd encourage you to go check that out. And then lastly, Brady is a Canadian. And I'm excited that he decided, yes, I'll take on this podcast. Anyways, without further ado, here is my conversation with Brady Shearer. Well, hey, Brady, welcome to the Sowers Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this and getting to speak into, being a sower of the gospel in the places where people live, work, learn, and play. I was wondering if you'd just jump in and help us understand a little bit about how the gospel was sown to you and how you came to know Jesus.
Yeah, certainly. So I really credit two people specifically. The first would be my mother. She was a perfect embodiment, I would say, of a balanced Christian, if I can use that. I got really into faith for the first time for myself when I started attending a youth group in high school. And I grew up in this really small Baptist church, about an hour north of Toronto. And it was like 18 people. And all we had was like an acoustic guitar, and the pastor would just like preach like with his voice from the pulpit. So there was no electronics of any kind. We did have an overhead projector. That was our big piece of tech. And, the pastor's children would be up there changing over the slides as we got to the bridge of Days of Elijah so that we could all continue to sing along. Though, of course, who would
do the actions in unison?
Of course, it's all memorized. So it was redundant at that point. But hey, so I started attending this Pentecostal youth group in high school, and they have these drums, and they've got lights, and there's kids there my age. And they're not just the children of the pastor. And so I was like, wow, this is really cool. I'd say that was probably the first place that I ever felt accepted as like a human being in a group of people that wasn't my family. And that was like what really got me on fire for God, got me in a place where I was able to explore faith in a way that was accessible to me. So yeah, that youth pastor and my mother, those two probably would have played the biggest role in my spiritual formation during those extremely formative years.
And did the youth pastor kind of take you under his wing, or was it the general environment that he was part of creating with the other leaders that was kind of drew you in?
Yeah, it was definitely both. So there was plenty of peers of mine. I met my wife in youth group. The company that I started in Bible college, the first 6 employees were all from that youth group. So like most of my friends, we've been friends since the high school years. I'm 33 now, and so special relationships. But certainly that youth pastor, took me under his wing, and I wanted to be a youth pastor because of him, because I was like, if this is like a job you can have, like this is awesome. Like I would love to be able to give to other young people what was given to me. That was so special. And so if I could play a role in that on the other side of things, that'd be great.
So when did that start to kind of begin forming in your mind related to being a youth pastor? And you just said there that you went off to Bible college. So what was kind of going on in your life, that initial invitation?
Well, I mean, I think ministry just became like the only thing that preoccupied my mind.
Hmm.
I've always been a person that excels in academics, and I remember, once I was really involved in the youth group, like 11th grade, I basically like stopped getting A pluses in school and started getting B pluses because all of my time was being spent reading like theology textbooks
Hmm.
that like in my free time, and like learning about things that I was, oh, interesting, like theology this, and learning about, the gifts of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, commentaries, history of great mothers and fathers of the faith, past saints, like just learning everything that I possibly could. And so school for that officially was, of course, all I wanted to do. And all I wanted to do in my elective time as a teenager was spend time at the church. And so I figured, hey, if I can eventually do this as a vocation, absolutely. And all of the leaders in my life kind of affirmed um, that that calling for me. And what was cool was I think there was like 8 of us that went to Bible college from the youth group. And we all moved across the country to Edmonton, where we went to Bible college. And so we were all kind of going together. My first roommate in Bible college was the first employee at the company. Like we stood in each other's weddings, one of my very close friends. So that was also a big part of it. It was like an extension of youth group. It's like, well, hey, we got to graduate. We're all going to move across the country. We're going to go to Bible college together. So
And so talk to then about the company. Like when you were in Bible college, when did the digital engagement space and world start to come on your radar? And when did you start to see a space that you could carve out for what would become Pro Church Tools?
yeah, so I'm in Bible college. It's like 2010. And pretty quickly, I realized that as much as I wanted to be a youth pastor, I probably did not have the relational bandwidth to excel in that position because I was interning at this youth group, and like these kids deservedly needed so much of your time and like emotional battery. And I would just get drained really, really quickly. And I was like, man, if I do this like full time, like I'm not going to be able to give to these kids what they need. And I'm going to end up eventually compromising something myself, whether it's my physical health or, something morally or my family or like whatever it is. Like I just will not be able to do this. But I still only wanted to work with churches. And so I start in my second year, a different internship because they changed every year. And this time I was at a church plant and they were like, you're going to be our media director. And I was like, okay. They're like, you're young. And so here's a camera, and we want you to make a vision video for the church. So that was kind of my first big project. And I kind of fell in love with that project. I had no experience in video except for like a comms class in 10th grade. And so I go out with this DSLR camera, and I'm with my roommate, Mitch, first employee that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And we're kind of standing on the corner of this intersection in Edmonton. And what I want to do is I'm kind of modeling this vision video after City Church's vision video, where Pastor Judah Smith was pastoring, now Church Home. They've since renamed. So they had this really cool time lapse type of effect in a video where it's technically called tilt shift effect, where the edges of the frame are blurred and it makes everything in the frame look like these miniatures. So if you imagine like cars driving in a highway, there's no motion blur. And so they're like moving in a way where there's no blur. So they don't look fast. And then the blur on the edges makes it look like they're all like in a miniature set. That was the effect I was going for. So we're standing on the corner of this intersection and we didn't own a tripod. So we just have this camera propped up on like an electrical box. And this is 2010. And I'm taking pictures of cars as they drive by. 15 minutes in, I hear sirens behind me, and a police officer walks up and he says, "Hey, son, what are you doing?" And I'm like, scrambling. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this for a church, we're making a video." And he's like, "I don't think you should be taking pictures of cars." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, okay." He's like, "You should probably go home." So I was like, "Okay, yeah, okay, we'll go home." Just because like the ubiquity of tech and that wasn't around then. So it just looked strange, even though, of course, we were not doing anything illegal. So I get home with my buddy Mitch, and I'm like, "You know what? This is not for me. That was so embarrassing. Like that, forget it. Like I'm not cut out for this."
Hmm.
And then I just am like, "You know what? No, like we're gonna do this. We'll go to another part in the city. What are the chances the cops show up again?" And of course they didn't. And we finished this whole vision video. I deliver it to my pastor, and he is like, "This is outstanding work." And basically that became the first part of the snowball rolling down the hill where I was like, "Okay, I did a thing and I was good at it. Let me try another thing. I'll see if I can get good at it." And so we did design and we did web and we did photography and we did branding and we did social. And the more that I did, the more that I felt like, okay, this feels like a really good intersection of what I can do because I'm working with churches and I'm applying my, creativity and my acumen. But I'm not required to like just be talking all day long and my emotional battery is incredibly drained. And so that felt like the perfect place. And then I go back to class and I'm sitting next to my friends who are going to become youth pastors and worship pastors. And I'm like, "Guys, the same thing's going to happen to you." They're going to be like, "You're young. Get a Facebook page for our church." So I'm like, if I can do it, you can do it. So I start prochurchtools.com. I start a YouTube channel. I start our podcast all around, 20, 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there, depending on the platform. And I'm just publishing all the things that I'm learning as I go. So if I figure out something about a Facebook page, like I make a blog post about it. And basically, this was around the time where, digital for a certain generation, my generation, was really big. And it wasn't really big for anyone else yet. But for all of my peers who were starting to like have their lead pastor say, "Get us a Facebook page," they're typing into Google and they're finding me on YouTube, in the podcast form, in blogs. And so I start building an audience from there. And hey, the rest is history.
Wow. And so at what point did you go full time with it? While you were in school, right when you finished?
Yeah, pretty quickly. So I was making $1,200 a month at the church as a part-time intern, which to me was like the coolest thing ever because I was getting paid to work at church. And that was about 20 hours a week. And my wife and I got married in between second and third year of Bible college. So she's working insurance during the day because she did a 1 year Bible college program and I did the degree program 4 years. So she's working insurance during the day. She's working retail at night. And I am trying to get this business off the ground while I'm still in school full time. And I'm the media director at this church, 20 hours a week. So it's busy, busy time. And for anyone that hasn't been to and or lived in Edmonton, it's, forgive me, people that live in Edmonton, but like it's a godforsaken land. It is winter 6 months of the year. And I was not cut out for the level of dryness and extreme cold. Like I quickly learned that you have to plug your car in every night into actually like an electrical spot that every parking spot has,
Hmm.
because otherwise your car just like won't turn over in the morning. They don't plow their roads. They don't salt their roads. Everyone has a 4x4 truck. And I was in a little 96 Chevy Malibu with bald tires. And I'm just like trying to get my wife and I to and from work without dying every day. And I was like, I don't like this at all. I want to start like this online business. That's what I want. And so I was, praying to God. I was like, all I need is $1,200 a month. Okay. And so we had this service where, we would create media for churches on demand. And I gave it like 6 months and we are getting close to the end of the 6 months. And what happened was like a few churches signed up and enough churches signed up to basically cover that $1,200 a month. And we grew pretty quickly from there. I think within a year, the business was making six figures and I'm in my third year of Bible college at this point. And so it went from, idea to full time pretty quick. But I think in the moment, those 6 to 12 months of just sitting in my bathrobe all day while my wife works two jobs and she comes home and I say, "Honey, I installed a WordPress plugin today." And she's like, "Yeah, okay, goodbye. I have to go make real money,
Yeah.
you buffoon." So yeah, it all happened pretty quickly after that though.
Wow. And why do you think, I mean, you were carving out a space as time has gone on though. I'm from the articles, the blogs, the videos that you're putting out. I mean, digital engagement is so essential. So why is it so essential, do you believe, in sowing the gospel in our day?
2/3 of the world is active on social media. 2/3 of the world. That's a 2024 statistic from Statista. You can track it down if you care to. It's really hard to fathom how much attention is given to the internet and how connected it makes all of us. But anytime a church comes to us and they say like, hey, and this happens so much less than it used to. But in 2010, 2014, like this was like every other question was this, like, why should my church invest in this and care about this? And I simply say, hey, look, it's just the Great Commission, right? Go out into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples. The internet gives you that avenue for free and is you're one of the only people in the history of humankind that has this ability. And it's something that we take for granted because it is so ubiquitous amongst everyday life. But what's amazing is people that are using it, churches that are using it to connect to people in their community and, connect folks that are otherwise disconnected from church, back into church or into church for the very first time. And there's really no other structure in the world that allows us to do that at zero cost with this type of distribution. It's just unheard of.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying in 2010 to 2014, you were getting a lot of questions like, oh, why should I care about this? Nowadays, what are you finding are the biggest barriers for churches and pastors? Like maybe they'd believe you. And I mean, the stats back it up that, hey, like 2/3 of the world is on this thing. For pastors and churches, what are you finding is the greatest barrier for them to actually be digitally engaged?
So there's two. I would say the first one is just simply time and resources. The reality is that every person serving in church wears multiple hats, and social is usually still to this day, 10 years later than it was, when I was in Bible college or 15 years later, it's the responsibility that someone is given on top of their other responsibilities. And so it rarely gets the attention it needs. Nowadays, it's not like the know-how that folks are lacking. It's just like, I have other responsibilities and other projects that I need to devote my time and energy to, and social kind of gets the leftovers. And then the second part is helping senior leaders and leadership teams, pastors understand, like, how do you triangulate effort online to in-person, like, life change? How can we actually measure those things? How do we quantify those things? And so we have a few paradigms for that and frameworks that really help create that aha moment for senior leaders and pastors. And once that happens, they can kind of understand, okay, here's where we are and here's where we're trying to get to. And that can make things a lot clearer, because the really only non-negotiable rule about social media is what we call no weeks off. It requires consistent dedication, showing up and putting in the work. And if you take weeks off, what normally happens for churches is they get a ton of momentum or any type of momentum, but then they're wearing multiple hats, they're pulled onto a different project, the momentum dips, and then they kind of have to start it up all over again. And they never get to see what social can actually look like, what a great, website can actually look like in their ministry and how it makes a difference. Because understandably, they have fewer resources relative to most businesses and organizations. And so their time is so short, it gets spent elsewhere. And then you start to think, well, maybe social just wasn't for us. Maybe this digital thing isn't going to work for us. And I'll be the first to tell you, in-person ministry is what church is about. Everything that I do online and digitally is to supplement and augment what we do in person. We believe in the principle of congruency. So what you do online should be congruent with what your church does in person. And so I'm not like an advocate for, hey, online church is a good replacement for in-person church. I think we have pretty good data on that now. Pew came out with a really good study. I think it was like 15,000 plus respondents. This was an American-based study done in November 2022. So kind of like post-pandemic. And it's like, no one prefers online church over in-person. No, the online church thing is not cannibalizing in-person attendance. Really the best use for online church, as we've known forever, is for older people that have accessibility issues that can't get to church. So all of those things are true. And my efforts and emphasis on online is, how do we translate what we're doing in online and how do we get that to make a difference in person, basically?
Friends, we'll get back to my interview with Brady Shearer in just a moment. Prior to that, however, I want to let you know about Pro Church Tools, a company that is dedicated to helping churches navigate the biggest communication shift in the last 500 years. With products like Nucleus, which is a website builder, and Social Sermons, helping churches leverage their teaching on Sunday mornings, Pro Church Tools is truly helping churches and leaders navigate this enormous communication shift. To learn more about Pro Church Tools, you can visit prochurchtools.com. Once again, that is prochurchtools.com. And you can also find Brady on Instagram, instagram.com/Brady Shearer. And now back to my interview with Brady. What have you found to be, is it a constant moving target of the sweet spot of Pro Church Tools? Like I think you shared in the early days, it was getting churches signed up to be part of helping them build a marketing strategy. As time has gone on, you're resourcing churches. Your email goes out to close to 48,000 people a week with tips that they can keep up with. What are you finding is the sweet spot right now of the ministry of Pro Church Tools and coming alongside churches?
So we do a lot of different things. The one constant has been that free content. So consistent YouTube videos, consistent podcasts. I think we've done 800 plus podcasts, 600 plus YouTube videos, and then active on social media. So if you're the type of person that enjoys Instagram, if you enjoy Facebook, if you enjoy Twitter, if you enjoy TikTok, like we're active there, creating content, helping churches, as we like to say it, navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. And then that's all free. The great thing is that we've never done any brand partnerships. We don't do affiliate deals. We don't do anything. So we get to just talk about what we want. We don't sell courses. We don't sell education. So if I have a YouTube video, it's my honest opinion. It's not there to upsell you to the actual good information in a course that I have. And it's not full of products that are kind of giving me a kickback. Just for an example, we use a social media scheduler, and I'll shout them out here, called Vista Social. And our bill with them every single month is $2,500. And so they wrote me last week and they said, hey, we keep getting churches signing up for our content and they say they came from you. Do you want an affiliate link? And I was like, no. And they're like, well, what if we just discounted your plan? You wouldn't have to pay any money. Enough people would click with this every month. You would pay $0. So $25,000 saved a year. And I said, no. Because I don't ever want to feel like I have to say something for economical reasons, incentives, whatsoever. So the content is free, and it is free from any kind of subliminal stuff, except that we make our own products. So we talk about our own products in our content. So we have a software service called Nucleus. It's a church website builder, powers 3,000 plus church websites around the world. And we have a digital agency for churches called Social Sermons. And that's where we make social media content for churches one-on-one. And that's a much more expensive service. And we only work with about 150 churches. We're at max capacity right now. And that's where we make social content for churches, custom one-on-one. So that's all we do. So a bunch of different verticals. And the bedrock has been and will continue to be all that free content that we publish.
And you recently announced your biggest, most lofty and generous move to date. Can you tell us about that and where that idea started for you?
Yeah, so we have this church website builder. It's called Nucleus. You can find it at nucleus.church. And for years, we have been helping churches build their websites. Now, Nucleus is made for church staff and volunteers. So it's kind of like a Squarespace for churches. Hey, build your own site. It's got all these church-specific features. But what we found was churches were like, can you just do it for me? So we're like, okay. So we started charging $500 at first to build a church website. And then it became $1,000 to build a church website. And the first thing that we would ask a church to send in to us was photos of their weekend experiences. Because, our belief, church website design is show, don't tell. So all our websites have these big containers, big photo containers showing off the church's people, the vibrant life. That's the heartbeat of your church. That's what we should be seeing front and center. It takes about 0.05 seconds for people to make a first impression about your website. That's not happening by reading text. That's not possible. It's happening because of the images, the visuals people are seeing. So we noticed that these churches would send in these photos and they were frankly quite awful. And it was really unfortunate because we could tell man, if we were there, we could take some nice photos. It's just the person that took this didn't have that much expertise, didn't edit the photos well, and there's nothing we can really do with them. And so we deliver these churches their websites, and they'd pay us this money. And I was like, man, these don't even look as good as I'd like them to. I have higher standards for this, but there's nothing you can do when the photos look like that, except de-emphasize them. But then you're not really. Imagine going to imagine going to a restaurant's website and they just won't show you any of the food. You would go straight to Google My Business to see people's photos of the food because you're I need to know what the food actually looks like, what the seating actually looks like. So we had to put the photos on. They don't look so great. So then we came up with this idea. Okay, what if we sent real people professional photographers from the church space to these churches in person. We'll pay for them to travel, we'll pay for them to take the photos, and then we'll build churches' websites from these photos that we've taken for them. And that way the photos look awesome, the church website looks awesome. What's unique about us is like we have this really big audience, like 115,000 followers on Instagram, 150K on YouTube. You mentioned the YouTube, the email list, 50K churches. Like we have a lot. So I just sent out an email and said, hey, do you want to get paid to take photos at churches in your area? And within like a couple of weeks, we had this church photography network of like more than 1,000 photographers. And they were all good at their job. And they knew how to take photos in church, which is different than just like sending a local photographer that does weddings. So then we were like, okay, great. Now we have the ability to solve this. Okay, how do we want to make this accessible to churches? And the thing about websites is it's never fun to do a website project because it's this huge undertaking. And churches end up just like sticking with the website they have. I have this conversation all the time. It's not just church world, but like you'll go to someone's website, like, oh, we're just about to redesign that. It's like everyone wants you to know, like, hey, I know it's bad, but like we're working on it.
In edit mode.
Don't worry about it. So we were like, what if we just did it for churches for free? So we made this big announcement. We're going to give 1,000 church websites free makeovers by the end of 2025. We made this announcement about a month ago. There are, as of right now, more than 900 churches on the waiting list already. And like we haven't even published it to social yet. So the demand and response has been very, very beyond our expectations. 856 churches on the waiting list right now. And so we're making some more hires so we can work through this more quicker. But yeah, it's 100% free. We send the photographer to the church in person. They capture the weekend service. We build them a new site. We get on a call to deliver them this new site. We have weekly live training classes because once we hand off the site, it's like, hey, we've done all the heavy lifting, but we want you to be able to like, if there's like a inclement weather event, right? We're in Canada here, like, oh, church is not happening, crazy blizzard. We want you to be able to publish that banner. We want you to be able to add a new sign up flow for, VBS or whatever it might be. And so we give them all that training. And yeah, we've got 127 applications processed so far. We're sending out 10 emails to the waiting list per day. So we're working through them as quick as we can. But yeah, it's really exciting. And we're documenting the whole journey on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com, search for my name or Pro Church Tools. There's a new YouTube series we launched called Pro Church Tools Inc. that's kind of documenting the behind the scenes journey of the company. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary as a company in May of this year. And so we're like, hey, we've had this really fun time building this company. We want to show more of it. And so the big through line for that new YouTube series is, hey, track us as we tackle these 1,000 makeovers.
Well, I just want to, on behalf of church people, if I can be that person right now, just say thank you for the investment that you're making into the local church and doing that. I work with a number of church planners and leaders, and I know that for some, a website feels like such an enormous category of something that I know that I need to do it, but as you said, they're struggling to actually get there. So thank you for actually doing that. Can you share with us a story? I'm sure you get them all of the time, but of a church, of a pastor who has taken seriously some of the things that you've put together. And as you said, there's the ability to track, okay, they've started to emphasize, change some things online. Now they're making the transition and actually seeing some change. Can you share with us a story that comes to mind about somebody doing this?
Yeah, certainly. And I should say, because I neglected to mention it, if you want your church to get a website makeover, you can join the waiting list, nucleus.church. There's a big button, free makeovers. Click that. You can join the waiting list
Cool.
there. We'll get to you, 10 new emails every day. So give us some patience, but we're getting to them.
Yeah.
So first one, we were working with this church and the pastor comes to me and he says, we're a church. We've been in this area for 40 years. And like people still don't know like we're even here. I just want people to know we exist. So we started creating social content for them and we're using their sermons to, inspire this social content. And they're like, do we need a TikTok account? I was like, do you want to publish there? They're like, yeah, sure. We're not against that. I was like, great. Like it's another distribution channel, may as well. And within the first 30 days, this pastor sends me an email. He's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Let me tell you what happened. I'm a bivocational pastor and I think he works in film. And he's like, during the week, this guy who's new to our company comes up and says, like, are you a pastor? Because like, I saw you on my YouTube this week. And he's like, people are seeing us. And then later that week, he went and picked up some groceries And he told me, he was like, I was in a bad mood. Sometimes you're in one of those moods. And I was like,
Yeah.
yes, I know. And he's like, I'm waiting for the grocery pickup. I had ordered ahead. And this guy comes up to me and like I can see a expression on his face changes as he sees me. Oh, this is the person I'm handing the groceries to. And he asks, he says, are you a pastor? Because like you were on my TikTok feed all week. And this pastor goes, yeah, I am. He's like, that's so cool. My wife and I are new to town. Like, we're going to be checking your church out this weekend. And I was speaking with another church this past week, and they said, thank you so much for the social media content you make for our church. They didn't call it, they called it art. And they're like, thank you for the art that you make. Like, we've had 4 or 5 families start attending our church because of the social content. That was how they first were introduced to our ministry, and they've stayed. And that's the thing about this era of social media that's so special. The previous era of social, you really would only see content on your feed from your friend and family connections. Nowadays, if you think about what you see on social, probably half at least of what you see are from people that you don't follow, accounts that you don't recognize. That means that every mobile device in your church's vicinity has that same real estate up for grabs. And in this era of social that we call the discovery era, where really the content that you see now in your feed is about your personal viewing habits and interests, and really importantly for churches, your local geographic location plays a massive role in distribution. Nowadays, people that are close to your church physically are more likely to see content, even if the content itself is not like hyper relevant to them, because local plays a big role in distribution. And that's why these pastors are seeing like people that are connecting to their church because of where they live, which is really special. That was not true 5 years ago on social media. Like, the best time to be doing social ministry is right now. And I could go through any number of stories similar to this. Like, oh, I was at the chiropractor's office. And like, are you a pastor? And he's like, yeah, I am. And it's like, it's just amazing, like what social can do. And again, distribution is free. Like, when I was the media director, we were doing billboards, we did radio spots, we did TV, and printed like handout mailers. And we did all these things, and we would talk as like senior leadership, like the distribution on these is not free. And so if it doesn't work, like that billboard cost a lot of money. And also it didn't really help our church at all. Like, nowadays, socials distribution is free.
Hmm.
The the creation part is still paid. But what's amazing about churches is like we have senior leaders creating sermons every single week. Like, it's baked into the rhythm of church that we have content to pull from. If you're a lawyer, real estate agent, dentist, you got to do social on top of your normal job. The fallback is that even when you don't reach new people, you're still blessing your existing congregation followers with the wisdom of Scripture. And we need to hear it just as much as people that don't follow Jesus or are disconnected from church. And so it's just, yeah, never been a better time to be doing social ministry.
Mm-hmm. Brady, for you, what's getting you fired up the most these days about the church in Canada? It sounds like you're keeping tabs on quite a number of things that are going on in the church. What's getting you fired up about the church in Canada?
Yeah, so my church is about 3 minutes down the street, and on the corner of the intersection is another church. And like, two of my very best friends are the pastors at both of those churches. One is a big church and one is a small church. And every time I attend the big church, I was there yesterday because we're recording this on a Monday. Like, I am always just so blessed by how much love and care every person that serves there puts into like the weekend experience. I grew up in very small churches. This is the first like quote unquote large church. Although I got to say, like, it doesn't ever feel like a large church. Like, now that I've been there, it was weird at first, but now that I've been there for a while, like, I feel like I know like everyone. Um, and like every time I go home, I'm just like, man, like every person is putting so much effort, and like every kid, every age group, like is being blessed by being a part of this. And then there's my other friend who's the pastor at the church on the other side of the four corners, and smaller church that's been there for, 100 years. My church is like this big new church on the other side. And like everyone there is at the other side of the church, like is just as faithful and just as full of love. And just like, there are just so many churches that are doing such good work. And I come from like a very bad season of church hurt. And so like, I know what it's like to be in church and it to have a bad experience.
Mm.
And so like, what excites me is knowing the people that are visible, but the people that are just as much, maybe more so invisible, that are showing up week in, week out and doing like the work of the ministry. It's not glamorous, and they're not compensated especially well for it. And they're not even like thanked for it very often. And maybe they look at the fruit of their ministry and they go like, am I doing something wrong? Their faithfulness and dedication is what inspires me. Like they're going to be recognized in heaven far, far, far more than anything that I ever do, and it deservedly so.
Had it been, or has it been hard for you to get involved in the life of a local church? I'm sure people see your videos. Has that been difficult?
Yeah, certainly. I think like there was at the very beginning, it was quite easy. I was a lot younger and I didn't have as many kids. I didn't have as many responsibilities. And then you get a bit older and it becomes more challenging. But the nice thing is like my church uses our website builder and they use some of our stuff. But for the most part, like they're doing their own thing and they have their own creative department that has like a different skill set than mine. And so like I it's not as hard as it once was, I should say.
What do you love the most about the local church? And as you've, spent time, lots of people, it seems like there's lots of people, but maybe they just get, these stories get featured more, kind of become disenfranchised in the life of a local church. You shared about your own season of church hurt as you've been involved building the business. What has kept you engaged and committed to the life of the local church?
Yeah, so I think the closest relationships that you have are the ones that create the most hurt. And the biblical metaphor is one of marriage. And so I like to use that as well. Like the person that has hurt me the most in the world is my wife. And the person that has hurt my wife the most in the world is me because we are the closest person to each other. We've been together for 15 years now of the 33 we've been alive. And so just by proximity, that's what happens. And I have the responsibility in my marriage to continue to fight for like the best, and that responsibility falls on me. And my wife and I have an amazing marriage, and that's because we keep choosing each other, and we keep choosing like to make it the best. And I think that I have the same responsibility in the local church. There were times where I was like, this thing is broken, and I'm not going to go back. And I'm pretty sure they're all broken. And I'm pretty sure I was right about that, but doesn't negate my responsibility to like make it better, do my part to make it better, because I am also contributing to the brokenness of every church because it's full of human beings. And so I think it was a bit of a mindset shift. I remember, I don't even know how to explain it, but for years I would go to church and it was really challenging. And I literally can only chalk it up to like a supernatural change of heart that I don't even know if I asked for. But one day I went to church and like I just couldn't stop smiling. And every time I've been since, I've felt the same way. I go and I'm like, I am so happy to be here. And in terms of like, that's just like me and like the esoteric feelings inside of me. But in terms of like the actual logistics or, you know, practicalities of what makes church special, when I go to church and I see people that are younger than me, and then I see people that are older than me, and then I see people that are way older than me, and I see people that are way younger than me. I see people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, people of different levels of affluence. I see people that work in every single job you can think of, and I see every ethnicity in my church. And I think, where else in society could you find something like this? We're all gathering for a shared purpose. These people would never be in the same room except for this. And as culture becomes more and more divided, and as culture becomes more and more segmented, and we're kind of just all like tribal, this is what we do, this is all we care about. What's amazing is seeing people of all the different walks and ranges of life coming together. Like that is the church at its best. That's the ultimate promise for the church. And there's nothing like that feeling because you can't find it anywhere else.
What would be your encouragement to the pastor who maybe they're not apprehensive because they know that, 2/3 of the world is on social media, but they're tentative about their own abilities, the way that they look, or just anything that's becomes kind of this barrier, like the self-conscious. Maybe for someone it's like, I don't want to like be a platform person. Am I becoming a platform person by putting myself on social media? Like, just how would you encourage that pastor in wrestling with their own stuff and helping them understand the potential benefit?
Yeah, so I have a friend who has been on YouTube for 15 years, and he helps tons of people with YouTube. His name's Sean, and he always says, your first videos are your worst videos. So as you're getting started with this, the reality is that you can't ever become better at it until you like suck at it first. I've recently started doing a ton more cooking, And, a couple years in, like I'm pretty good at some things now. At the beginning, like people had to suffer through what I would make them, because like the first is always the worst. So that's like an inescapable reality. So if you feel that resistance, just know like, hey, every single other human being on earth will and has felt this resistance if they go through this same path. And so it's totally normal. Most people quit because they don't like that resistance. So don't quit and you'll be different. As for like, oh, my voice sounds like this, I look like this, like, I was saying before we hit record, like I look like the crypt keeper on today's call. I don't know what it is about the lighting. I got this nice setup in here. It's washing me out in the middle of like the summer when we film this. Like it's a tough scene for me. So we all don't always look our best, and that's okay because we think about that as ourselves and our human bodies, and then nobody else thinks about it but us. And then in terms of just like kind of pushing through, and like, is this something my church should do? Again, back to that principle of congruency. Um, if you're the type of church where the biggest slice of the weekend pie in terms of programming is yourself or the senior leader on stage preaching to people, then it's perfectly congruent to have a big chunk of the pie online be like your understanding of scripture and teaching that wisdom from scripture. Because that's what we do in person. And guess what? It makes for great content online as well. And so I think when churches start treating online differently than in person, that's when like the red flag pops up for me. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated differently, but when the default position is treating it differently, to me, that's less about mission and it's more about method. And this happens in churches all the time. We elevate and idolize method over mission, and we conflate it and we say method actually is the mission. And that's when we get into those conversations of, well, we've always done it this way. Well, it's like, well, that's not mission. Mission should be, are we fulfilling what our church is called to? And our church is not called to do something because we've always done it that way. And we can't let personal preference become the actual mission of the church. So that would be the challenge, and also the word of encouragement. Like just it's always going to feel nasty at first. Every new skill is that way. Don't let that feeling of foreignness be a reason to stop, because that's just discomfort that comes with learning anything new and trying anything new.
How do you continue to innovate? I mean, I'm sure you're always with Pro Church Tools and with your team trying to think, okay, what's the next thing for us to try to understand? Like, how have you created a culture of innovation? Maybe you're a natural creative. You like to invent.
Yeah, I'd say my personality is pretty evenly split between creative and pragmatist. So I spend just as much time in my spreadsheets as I do kind of like at a blinking cursor writing. And so I think that does give me somewhat of a unique perspective. I'm very good at operating businesses. I'm also quite good at writing and storytelling and the creative side, but I'm not like a pure business operator.
Mm.
As evidenced earlier with my $25,000, mistake, quote unquote. We have people that come into the business for the first time all the time, and they say, you could be a lot bigger if you X, Y, and Z. And I go, yeah, that's a feature, not a bug. That's intentional. But I'm also not a pure creative. And so like, I don't just like, suffer and show up to meetings late and miss deadlines, and shouts to all the creatives out there, because you're making amazing things despite your inability to sometimes stick on the plan. So that does give me a unique perspective. But for me, I find that the innovation comes from the things that have nothing to do with creativity. So going on daily walks, taking care of my diet, getting enough sleep. And then I love getting my inspiration from industries that are not the church. So one of my favorite things to do, and this is like fusion in cooking, where you take like one type of ethnicity's cuisine and another country's cuisine, you like throw them together. Like, wow, who'd have thought? That's where innovation comes from. And so I love to look at other industries, and I have a ton of kind of recreational interests. And so I look at like, okay, what are the fantasy football at this time of year, like creators doing on their YouTube thumbnails? Oh, interesting. Okay. What can I learn about how they're doing their YouTube thumbnails? Or what are the fashion people doing like with their social media content? What can I learn from that? And then usually you can bring something really innovative to your space, because what we do in our spaces is we follow other people in our space, and then it kind of just becomes like the same things recycled over and over again. And so that's another one of the just really practical ways I like to look at new creative options.
Brady, just in closing, what is Jesus teaching you these days?
Oh, well, I would say patience during this summer season with my children at home. I have, that's true, but also a joke. We're recording this a bit early. Right now, I have, at the time of this recording, a little bit of an issue with my knee. There's a ganglion cyst on my ACL joint, which is apparently quite rare. Ganglion cysts are usually on like, wrists and stuff. There was an old medical technique for healing these. It was called beating them with a Bible, actually, where you would just like
Wow.
smack it off because it's not problematic at all, except when it's on your ACL, apparently, because it makes it very difficult to, move your leg. And I was talking with one of my pastor friends, pastor's one of those churches, and I was saying, I was like, I know, God is teaching me, like we go through these tough seasons, but there's always something better on the other side. And my pastor, also maybe not. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, sometimes life is just suffering. And it's not our job to be like, on the other side in this life is going to be like ultimate triumph. He's like, no, that's not how things almost ever work. It's, can I suffer well? Because suffering is guaranteed. And so that's the season you're in. So enjoy suffering well. And I was like, that's why I don't hang out with you as much as I would like to now.
Yeah.
He's always challenging me with these things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's definitely something that God is teaching me. And it's like, hey, this is what you have. How can you, live a life that honors me despite that, and not just be like, yeah, this is a waiting period until like ultimate triumph on the other side, because in this life that's never a guarantee, of course.
Brady, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast, and thank you for what you and Pro Church Tools are doing in investing in the life of local churches all across the globe.
Yeah, shouts to all the Canadian churches. We're Canadian. We love you. Thanks for doing great work, and thanks for the invite. Really appreciate it.
Well, friends, I'm sure you would agree that there is so much from this conversation with Brady that could be applied as this episode's action step. The thing that I want to emphasize, however, is when Brady just simply shared with us the very real reality that 2/3 of the world are online, and that generally engaging online through social media platforms is absolutely free. And so, what is one of the most accessible ways that you can sow the gospel in your community? Online digital engagement. And so maybe you're asking, where do I begin? And to begin, I'd invite you to check out prochurchtools.com, subscribe to Brady's newsletter, which will give you weekly emails that will help you have new strategies and give you some tips and tricks of how to begin engaging online. But more importantly than that, I'd encourage you not to think that you need to take this all on yourself, but to find other people around you within your community that may have gifts in this particular area, who are currently engaging online themselves and may be able to serve your church or serve your team in digital engagement. This is an area, again, that is so critical in sowing the gospel in our day and in our time. As always, thanks for joining this and listening to this episode of the Sowers Podcast. I'm really excited for this new season and all of the guests that I already have lined up for the coming year. If you have anyone that you'd like to suggest or recommend, I'd love to hear from you. You can engage with me online or email ask@thesowerspod.ca. In closing, here is a clip from the episode that will be released next week with Rob Chartrand of the Church in the North podcast.
We got to break outside of this kind of monolithic vision of theological ministry education. So I started conducting focus group studies. I conducted focus group studies in 4 separate cities with a total of 23 different ministry practitioners. And I put together a series of questions about, their experiences in theological education, what they wish they would have learned, what would they look at if they were hiring a youth pastor today or a pastor today, and all of that. Brought it together, so grounded qualitative research, and that formed the basis of the design of a new program.